Okay, and we're back.
Yes.
All right, and now we're gonna do House of Fanfic.
Yes. Okay, so I am very passionate about writing, and when we're talking about this, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? How do we think are we gonna do? And I'm like, we should do how to fanfic because I am always prepared to talk about writing. So, basically, after a rant between me and Papa, we decided that the best way to organize this is to do a bunch of do's and don'ts.
You want me to read the do's, and you can like elaborate on them?
Yes, please.
They're all the way up here.
Oh my gosh, okay,
Uh,
finding them. I have my list of credentials includes I've been role playing for far too long, longer than a lot of people have been alive in the Italia fandom. I also did like AP. I have to keep myself from saying APH. Ha. I also did like AP English, AP Lit, composition. So I had to read books like Dostoevsky and Mark Twain and books like The Heart of Darkness and what is it, Shelley's Frankenstein. I can't remember her last name, but I read the original Frankenstein. It was actually pretty cool. It was pretty good. When she wrote it, she was actually a teenager, so Frankenstein was almost like a fanfic, but she's not a fan, so it's just good writing at that point. Did you find?
okay, I found the do's.
Okay, thank you.
Do have a general idea where you're going before you begin. Organize your writing. Flow charts, outlines. That's a good writing advice in general.
Yes. This is just something that you learn in English that uh, benefits you outside of the English class. And when I say, or when Papa says like flow charts, I mean like literally write all your ideas down and then draw arrows in the direction that you want to go. Sometimes it's good to have a visual of where you want to go. Um, I actually usually do like outlines. So I'll put all my main events and plots and things that I want to have happen, and then I'll put like little sub detail things underneath it. And then after you finish your outline, you'll literally have like a freaking skeleton there for you. Cause, excuse me, it actually annoys me when I'm reading really good fanfic and then the the author just drops it, and it's just like, oh well, I ran out of ideas, and it's like, well, if you would have planned it beforehand, maybe you wouldn't have ran out of ideas.
And I definitely know what this feels like about like drop caption and drop fanfics because you have no idea where you're going with them.
Exactly.
Oh gosh, I'm so guilty of that.
Oh, Papa, remember when you were talking about Hussey and how he's basically planned everything since the beginning?
Oh gosh, Hussey, he's like my role model. Like I want to be able to be as awesome as Hussey is because he, like, guys, you just
Oh wait,
ever get
first
into
let's explain
Homestuck.
who Hussey is. Let's explain who Hussey is.
Homestuck, Andrew Hussey is the creator and author of the webcomic Homestuck, which you should know about because it's all over Tumblr and everybody hates it, but everybody loves it, and nobody knows what the hell is going on. And there's hands all over the fucking place now.
Oh my God.
He went back and he put hands all over the place, and you will understand that. But yeah, so Hussey, he made this web comic, and it's gotten so and there's so much stuff in it that like you go back and you reread parts, and you're like, holy shit! It's like they don't even become relevant until like thousands of hundreds of pages later, and you're like, what the hell? And
Yeah, but
that is a good
I
that's
mean,
good writing right
that
there.
might be that might be a case of just good old fashioned bullshitting. Like you read over your I mean, you still need a good method of organization to know what the heck is going on, especially something like Homestuck. But basically you take all of your main points and then you might not like you might put them away for a while, but you'll bring them back up and you'll extrapolate on them. So this actually brings me to my next topic about fanfics. So there are different kinds of fan fiction. And this post has been like traveling around Tumblr. I happen to have it in front of me. And basically, it's a line graph explaining like the different kinds of fan fiction. So you have an extension. An extension basically is you have canon plot and you have the fan fiction plot. The fan fiction plot usually occurs after or before the canon plot, and it's just an extension of the canon plot. And then you have like the addition. And the addition, I would also want to say this like extrapolation. Another word for it is a one shot. So you have one event in the canon plot. You take that one event and then you just extrapolate on it. So you take it and you just go into detail, you add things to it, you good old fashioned bullshitting. And then
Yeah.
another type is alteration. So you have a point in the canon plot, but then you basically strike off and do your own thing. So from that point onward, nothing else in the canon plot applies. And those are actually pretty fun because you get to go into hypotheticals and whatnots. And then, of course, you have the alternative universes. Role players are really familiar with this. You have the canon plot and then you have the fan fiction plot. The only thing you really use is like the characters, maybe the setting. You might not even use a setting. It's just your writing. And then on here they have something called a crack fic. I think that's just where you're writing. You don't you don't have to write. I mean, you don't even need organization for this. You're just. I think that's what Andrew Hussey's doing. It's one big crack fic.
No. No.
Papa, no one knows what's going on.
We do no. There is actually a plot in Homestuck. Everybody just likes to say we have no idea what's going on. Like, there's only one thing that has happened in Homestuck that I have no idea what the hell is doing in the comic, and that
I
would be the
wonder
trick.
what's a. I wonder what's a what like what it fanfic is he cracking? Like like what fiction? Like what fandom is he cracking? I don't even.
He's cracking his own fandom. He's trolling the fandom so hard.
He's cracking his own fandom.
I'm expecting to see John Egbert standing in my bedroom any minute now. Okay, let me go on to the next few. Do you organize the development of your characters? Supporting characters, dynamic characters, ones that change, static characters, ones that don't.
Basically, know what the heck you're doing with your characters. There are different kinds of characters. There are, of course, supporting. They're the main character, but then there are also supporting characters. Typically, when I'm role playing, I use a lot of supporting characters to move the plot along, and they're very useful supporting characters. Also, within that, you have two different kinds of characters in development. Static usually means that it's unchanging. You can't have a static in-depth character, but typically they're kind of shallow. They stay the same throughout the story, usually a short story. Dynamic characters, usually sometimes the main character, sometimes not. But dynamic basically means it's changing. And with dynamic characters, maybe they'll have an epiphany, maybe something, an event in their life changes their view of the world, all those kinds of things. So.
Okay, next is do you edit your stories for wordiness? Be efficient with your words. Editor's tips. Any words less than 4 letters, look at it. You may not need it. Most supporting words we use in our speech, but can weaken your writing.
Yeah. So, as Papa read very nicely, um, with with writing, I notice a lot of people, especially on the internet, they write the way that they speak. And when you're speaking, we use a lot of supportive words like to, it, the, a, all the little words shorter, usually shorter than 3 letters. But the way that I was taught in English is like usually bad words or 4 letters. So our teacher would say, watch out for those 4 letter words. But a good editing tip to strengthen your writing is to get rid of all of the small little supporting words. Because the more words that you add to a phrase in your writing, usually it weakens the whole passage. So basically, just go through, read it, edit out all little words. I mean, you're gonna need some words like the of. Don't go crazy, but it's definitely a way to improve and strengthen your writing.
Okay. Now we're going to the don'ts. Don't use footnotes, especially in Hitalia fanfics where different languages are used.
Oh
Footnotes
God.
make the reader stop what they're reading to go basically research whatever note. This can mess up the flow of your piece. Try to be deliberate and efficient in the information you provide.
Oh my gosh, this is like a pet peeve of mine. There are a lot of like just really awesome, specifically Hitalia fanfics where they're really well researched and they have all these footnotes and it looks impressive. But if you're in the middle of a scene and you have to stop because Russia's speaking Russian and you can't fucking read Russian, that just messes up your whole flow. Don't do that. Be very deliberate. And when I say deliberate, I mean basically use it only because you know what you're doing. Like, if Russia's speaking Russian, you and most people who are reading your fanfic can't even speak Russian. The person he's talking to, do they know what he's saying? If not, do they know by the tone? Describe the tone of how he said whatever he said, or even if you're just describe what he's saying in the sentence, it or like maybe just context clues. You remember context clues from like kindergarten? Yeah, use
Yeah.
context clues. Footnotes though, don't footnotes. Don't 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 go overboard.
Okay. Don't use languages your reader might not know. Not all cases are unacceptable, but if you're using a different language, make sure it's clear why it's being used. So you can even get away with describing the tone of foreign languages to reflect understanding or lack thereof.
Yeah, it irritated me so much I just have to repeat. Basically be deliberate in why you're using that language. Like the most important thing. If Russia's speaking Russian, is he speaking Russian because he's talking to one of his citizens? Is he speaking Russian because he's talking to himself? I mean, does he know that whoever person he's speaking to can understand it? Does he know the person he's speaking to can't understand and he's saying something nasty about them? I mean, at that point, you're doing something interesting with the language, and then to me at least, it's a little bit more acceptable of why it's being used. But just don't go overboard with the footnotes because you're gonna have to footnote it and put the translation at the bottom, and then it's just like, oh, he was saying that he's an asshole. That's interesting. Like, just don't go overboard with the footnotes, man.
The next one is don't marry Sue, Gary Sue. We had a whole talk about this in the role playing section.
Yeah,
Uh,
so last year, last year we were basically talking about character development and just basically Mary suing and Gary suing is when you take a character and you just flat iron them. They have no flaws. They're perfect in every way and they poop rainbows. Like don't do that. I mean, I don't even. I think I just put it down because it's something that annoys me that happens from time to time. Like, oh, good example, especially in Italia, because Italia's been on my mind. You'll get OCs for countries like Israel or Iran, and usually the person who made the OC is from that place. Good example, when I was role playing on Gaia, there was an Israel, and they were basically Gary Sue, Gary Stu, a Mary Sue, Gary Stu type character. They had like no flaws. They were like the perfect victim because everyone always picks on them. And I mean, globally speaking, yeah, Israel's in a bad spot right now. But I mean, they don't poop rainbows. So it's definitely something you should avoid doing, especially if you have invested emotional attachment to your character. They're not perfect.
okay, and then the final one is don't role play with yourself. Role playing is different from writing prose. You have to be more deliberate and organized in delivery.
It's prose, Papa. This is not French.
Prose. Oh gosh, was that? Did I really just say a French word?
Yes, you were like proise or something. Proise. Is that a French word? Proise?
I
Anyway,
don't know. It might be. I'm just pronouncing all sorts of things French. Like lately, I blame this fucking French
you have
class.
French tongue. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, don't roleplay with yourself. Fanfickers are often sometimes role players, and when they're writing a fanfic, it's because no one is role playing with them at the time. That's just a generalization, overgeneralization. But with role players, when writing, role playing is definitely not traditional writing. With role playing, you're basically taking all these characters and you're putting together a story with all these different points of view, which is actually an acceptable uh, version of storytelling. Holy crap, what was I talking about? Oh, okay. Role players and fanfickers. Yeah. It's an acceptable story. It's a acceptable way to tell a story is to role play because good example, Mark Twain. Mark Twain actually one of his books, I can't particularly remember the title at the moment, but basically it was an epic adventure. And when I say epic adventure, I mean like classic epic. It was a classic epic about basically poor white trash and them having to bury their mother. But it was interesting because each chapter was a point of view from each of the family members. So like the youngest son who was like mentally challenged, his chapters were interesting because it was just like a flow of thought the whole time because he really can't communicate or anything like that. And then the sister, who's kind of a floozy, but she doesn't really have a role in the family, so she's kind of looking for that. And her chapters were very. She didn't have that many chapters. I think she only had two, but usually her chapters were very serious. Like I think she ends up getting pregnant. Or even the point of view of the mother, who the point of view of the mother. I mean, in the whole story, she's dead. But this chapter is specifically just explaining how everyone got to that point. So this was like shortly after the father had married her, and just how she felt, even though she was, providing for her family and all that, she felt very confined and condemned by her husband and all that. So it's a good way of telling a story, point of view, and that's usually how role players do it. But that's
Right.
not your only that's not your only way of telling a story. That's not your only way to deploy a story. Just you don't need a character there for every moment in your story. You should be able to describe the setting, describe the politics of the land, assemble some supporting characters together to move the plot along. Just don't role play with yourselves.
Okay, and I think that about wraps it up.